Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com and the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I hope you are all doing well. I hope you're enjoying your weekend, and I hope that you're enjoying what the Bengals have done so far in this year's draft. And it's been a little different. It's been actually kind of predictable, which is the first time we can say that in quite some time. The Bengals in the first round drafted Billy Price, the center out of Ohio State. In the second round, they drafted the Wake Forest safety, Jessie Bates. That one was a little different for some folks. A lot of people thought Justin Reed would have been the pick. A lot of people thought, they may get one of those guys who were slated to be first-round picks who had slid into the early part of the second round, but the Bengals moved back and had back-to-back picks in the third round, and they grabbed linebacker Malik Jefferson and defensive end Sam Hubbard, another Ohio State product. So it's pretty interesting. The Bengals have actually shied away from a lot of Ohio State guys for a very long time in the draft. I mean, we're talking maybe the Dan Wilkinson days, maybe. There's probably some other ancillary guys that they got later on, but with two of their top four picks this year, they got two Ohio State players. And for, a lot of Buckeye fans are Bengals fans. And for them, I guess it's good news because, they get to see some of those guys that were so productive for Ohio State stay in the state of Ohio and play for the Bengals. Also, side note, Denzel Ward, another Ohio State defensive player, cornerback, went to Cleveland. So a lot of Ohio State guys are actually staying in the state of Ohio, which is pretty cool for fans of both teams. I'm going to try and get to some questions here before we get out of here. Again, I'm Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com, as well as the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. And I urge you, a little bit of a self-promotion, I urge you, if you have not checked out our podcast yet, please do so. You can get it on SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, all that stuff. It's also on Cincy Jungle. Also, keep it to CincyJungle.com to get all of the news, updates, analysis of all the picks throughout the weekend. We're about halfway through, so to speak, for the Bengals and what they're doing this weekend. So, keep it at CincyJungle.com. We'll also be doing a Facebook Live to wrap things up tomorrow. I see Matthew Adams saying OHIO. Obviously, that's the big the Ohio State University kind of little tradition they have there. So yes. So my thoughts, I guess, Rebecca Toback talked a lot about Billy Price last night on our Facebook Live session. I like the pick. Obviously, probably the biggest need in terms of position on the team. I don't necessarily like it at 21. I thought maybe they could have moved back in another pick or what have you and still get Price in the first round if they wanted to do that. But they saw Frank Ragnow go right, a guy they liked reportedly, go right before him at pick 20. And all of a sudden, they may have hit the panic button a little bit. And they went and got another guy that whether he was their top center on their board or the second center on their board or what have you, they got Price at number 21. And, I have my reservations a little bit about that pick, but, I obviously it's going to be an upgrade over Russell Bodine. And I have a lot of trust in Frank Pollock. And I think that, he knows what he's doing. And he knows good offensive linemen. He built a great offensive line at Dallas. And, I think, is he Travis Frederick, the all-pro, the perennial all-pro in Dallas? No, I don't think so. But I think he's going to be a solid player to a very good player and one that will immediately help the Bengals offensive line. What's going to be interesting is now what happens at the right side of the line because the Bengals did not draft another interior lineman. They had a chance to maybe, if they moved up a few picks or if they didn't move back, Connor Williams, the offensive lineman out of Texas, was available, ended up going to the Cowboys, ironically, with Paul Alexander. Orlando Brown is still floating out there. I'm not a fan of him, but you can take a flyer on him on day 3. Why not? That's not a big deal. I'm glad they didn't do it on day 2, but there are some guys out there. But they also have Christian Westerman, Alex Redmond, Cedric Aboye, Jake Fisher to kind of do, and Trey Hopkins is in there too, kind of to duke out for those other 2 positions. So I'm really curious to see what the Bengals end up doing in day 3. So as expected, at least from my perspective, the Bengals kind of went meat and potatoes with this draft. There's nothing real sexy. I guess you could say the safety, the ball hawk, Jessie Bates III. He's kind of the sexy pick or the skill position pick, I guess, of the bunch. A guy that personally I think I like Justin Reed a little bit more, but a guy that had 5 picks and two returned for touchdowns in 2016, but he only had 1 pick last year. And I don't know what happened exactly to warrant the drop there. I mean, I think he had a couple of injuries, but pretty significant drop in terms of production. But obviously the Bengals made it known. They want another safety, and they want a guy who can create turnovers. And, between starting William Jackson, getting Bates on the field, and a couple of other players that they've added, I think that they feel that these are good fits under Terrell Austin, the new defensive coordinator, with the Bengals. So it's going to be interesting to see how they mix Bates in. I think maybe Williams, even though he signed a pretty lucrative deal recently, I think that he kind of may be the third safety. Maybe the Bengals play Aloka and Bates, and then let Williams kind of be that linebacker / safety hybrid. Lot to determine there. I guess I haven't been totally enamored with all of the picks. I guess there are others that feel that the Bengals have done far better than what they've done in my eyes. But I also, this is a year that need to be addressed for the first time in a while. And it's, like I said, it's kind of the not so sexy positions. Last year, they drafted 2 wide receivers in the first 4 rounds. They drafted a running back in the second round. So there's a lot of, that was like, wow, fun. And this year's more like, what? We got to get down to the nitty gritty. We got to help our defensive lines. We got to get after a quarterback, and we got to protect our own quarterback. And so far in the first 3 rounds, the Bengals have done that. I guess in terms of value, potential upside, and everything like that, my favorite pick is actually Malik Jefferson, the linebacker out of Texas. I think he's super athletic. I think he has incredible upside. Is there work to be done? Absolutely. But he is a guy that has speed. He's got good size. And I think, if you look at using a 3rd-round pick on him as opposed to using a 3rd-round pick on Nick Vigil a couple of years ago, I think most people would say Malik Jefferson's probably a better prospect now than Nick Vigil was coming out of college. Now, Nick Vigil could still be a guy who helps the Bengals out, and, I hope he does. And I think, the Bengals will use a lot of rotational things, and I think that's part of the reason why they drafted Bates, so they can kind of use that nickel formation, get some athletic guys on the field, get guys on the field who are quick, guys who can chase down players who have the ball, and guys who can create turnovers. That's what it's going to be about. Sam Hubbard, a guy, I wasn't very big on him. I think where the Bengals got him, it's proper value. So that, I don't think it was a reach by any stretch of the imagination. And, the Bengals need a guy to come in and fill in for Chris Smith. Chris Smith left in free agency. They obviously wanted him, but Cleveland paid quite a bit of money for a guy who's a rotational defensive end. And, the Bengals need another guy in there. And side note, I felt a little awkward for Michael Johnson talking about, he announced a pick for another defensive end. That was kind of weird. But I don't think, again, this, a lot of people are anxious to push Michael Johnson out of the door and all of that because of his salary. Still could be on the table for discussion. I don't think it is, even with the Hubbard pick. I think Hubbard's going to be a rotational guy that takes the place of Chris Smith, probably a slight upgrade from that. And that's not a slight on Hubbard because Smith had a decent year with the Bengals last year. I think you get younger, obviously cheaper with Hubbard. So you have Hubbard, Lawson, Johnson, and Carlos Dunlap, obviously at the edge positions. Not bad. not bad. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of Sam Hubbard, but I think it's a solid pick. I think it's right around in terms of target of value. I think it's right there. And the Bengals, they needed some help on defense. They needed to. Yes, they got after the quarterback last year, but they struggled against the run. They struggled creating big plays and turnovers, pick sixes, all that kind of stuff. So they've made a concerted effort to help out their defense and Terrell Austin. It seems as if Terrell Austin and Frank Pollock, the two new assistant coaches, are having quite a bit of say in the war room this year. Obviously there are other powers that be that make the picks, but they're having a little more say. This is CincyJungle.com Facebook Live. I hope you've enjoyed day 2 of the NFL Draft. In case you actually have a life and have not been glued to the TV, the Bengals selected Billy Price in the first round on Thursday night. They selected Jessie Bates III, the safety out of Wake Forest, in the second round after moving back and swapping third-round picks, so to speak, in the third round with the Chiefs. So Billy Price, Jessie Bates, the safety, and then they grabbed Malik Jefferson and Sam Hubbard, two front 7 defenders that I think could help the Bengals right away in various capacities going forward. And I've said it about 2 or 3 times already. Not sexy picks, but necessary picks. I see Jeff Cochran now get rid of Dalton. Now, I want to say this. I thought it was very, very interesting that, based on that comment, and by the way, they're not going to get rid of Dalton or anything like that. That's not the route I'm going. I'm going to say this. I thought it was very, very interesting that the Steelers leapfrogged the Bengals in the third round, 1 pick ahead of them. I think they traded with the Seahawks to get Mason Rudolph, the Oklahoma State quarterback. Obviously the Steelers have Big Ben. He's been flirting with retirement sort of over the past couple of years. They drafted Josh Dobbs last year. They have Landry Jones, the old Oklahoma signal caller, still on their roster. They're not apparently enamored with him. And they got Mason Rudolph, and that was a guy that some people think that the Bengals might have been interested in. So it would have been kind of interesting to see if those 2 consecutive third-round picks that the Bengals made would have changed if the Steelers did not go up and take Mason Rudolph. Would he have been a third-round pick for him? I don't know. I do think that the Bengals tomorrow on Saturday will take a quarterback at some point, and probably will find some form of an A.J. McCarron type of backup or a guy to compete with Matt Barkley. And I'm a little higher on Matt Barkley than most, but I do think the Bengals are probably going to look at quarterbacks, especially on day 3. Luke Falk is one from Washington State that's still available. Kyle Lauletta from Richmond. A multitude of others are available. There's a couple of I'm seeing questions and comments here. I'm interested to see if the Bengals will take a running back and or receiver tomorrow. I don't know exactly how high that is on their board, seeing as how they used a couple of high picks last year at the wide receiver position. But Cedric Pierman, their special team staple, still a free agent, and he's been in the league for a while, so they're probably looking to move on from there, even though he's been a good player for them and a great guy in the locker room. Running back could be in play. Jeremy Hill left in free agency, so they might need to get a big quote-unquote thumper. They could get some guys with value on day 3. We'll see. I see my good friend Mike Donahue talking about kick returner. I think that is something that they need, and that's potentially where I'm looking at in terms of running back, wide receiver, that sort of thing, with a potential adding of a wide receiver or running back on day 3, even though that seems a little lower on the pecking order in terms of needs. I think that the Bengals are probably looking for a little bit more in the special teams unit. They let go of Adam Jones, who at this point is his biggest contribution would probably be as a nickel corner and or a special teams return guy, and he hasn't been signed by anybody. So, I think the Bengals may get a speedy guy. They've been connected to a couple of running backs. I believe one is from NC State. There's a couple of guys that are speedy and have kick return ability. So I think, I think there's a guy out there, especially that has kick return ability that they can, they could use this year and potentially going forward. I'm Anthony Cosenza with CincyJungle.com. Thanks for tuning in live. I hope you've been enjoying the draft weekend. I hope you will enjoy what the Bengals do tomorrow. They've got a multitude of picks. I believe 7, if I'm not mistaken, so far. They could move back, they could move up, all of that. I would have liked to have maybe seen them move up in round 2 to get some of these guys who have fallen, but, they stayed put. They got a guy that they really like. And by the way, if we're ever doubting, we can sit here and do our mock drafts and all that. If you ever want the inside scoop, and granted, it's only going to be a couple of days before the actual draft, you need to follow what Dave Lapham says about the Bengals, because he said either Frank Ragnow and Billy Price in the first round, and he said Jessie Bates on day 2. And lo and behold, they drafted those 2 guys. So got to give the guy credit. He probably has a good look at their big board to leak it. So it is what it is. Just to get out of here, Mark Bennett says tackle. I think at some point, even given the issues in his pre-draft workouts, I think the Bengals take a flyer on. I think the Bengals take flyers on guys tomorrow. I just do. Orlando Brown is one. Antonio Callaway, the receiver out of Florida. If he falls all the way till 6th round, 7th round, the Bengals have 3 7th-round picks, so they can get cute if they want. And if Callaway is a guy that they really like, who has borderline first-round talent, but has undrafted free agent type of baggage, if he's a guy that they like and he's available at the end of the draft, why not? Orlando Brown, I wouldn't have been comfortable in the first 2 days with him, but the Bengals still may get another offensive lineman, a guy who could play guard/tackle, a guy who could play guard/center. All of those could be in place still on day 4, as well as some of those skill positions, running back, wide receiver, maybe even a tight end. We don't know. But as of now, 4 picks in, 2 days into the draft, the Bengals grabbed a center who should start day 1 for them, given some things we've heard with the medical issues, but should start day 1. They grabbed a safety who should be playing day 1, a guy who will be kind of rotating in and out. And then they grabbed 2 guys, again, a linebacker, Malik Jefferson, a guy who should be kind of like Bates, Jessie Bates, rotating in and out of the defense and playing quite a bit, as well as the rotational pass rusher in Sam Hubbard that they got in Ohio State. So, I think what's good, the Bengals struggled a little bit on defense last year, and they've addressed that immediately and early in this year's draft. They addressed essentially all major needs so far. Center, a playmaker, a center fielder in the defense, as well as pass rusher and an athletic linebacker. So whether you agree or disagree with the value, pretty solid players, some upside with them, and guys who should be able to contribute right away on some level. And that's what this team needs in 2018 if they're going to turn things around from the past 2 losing seasons. I'm Anthony Cosenza. Keep it to CincyJungle.com for all of the news, analysis, opinions, all that good stuff. And if you haven't yet, if you're just kind of joining the Facebook Live type of thing, like the Facebook page from Cincy Jungle. And if you get a chance, we record podcast episodes, The Orange and Black Insider. I'm one of the hosts. Check that out. It's on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes. Appreciate that as well. Enjoy the rest of your draft weekend. I'll probably see you via Facebook Live tomorrow after the Bengals make the remainder of their picks, and hopefully that we have some more good news and that they've rounded out the roster well. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and Hoo Day.